Good afternoon. We're back on the record. State versus George Zimmerman. Case number 12CF1083A. Okay, just as a preliminary, Bobby, you want to give a couple, two to each side? This is just a review of those questions. Have not formed an opinion and have no hardship. That's the list.
Do we speak here? Do you want to speak at the bench and questions about procedure?
Yeah, come up to the bench, please. Okay, Deputy Jarvis, can we bring in the next potential juror?
Yes, ma'am, Your Honor, as of just a couple of minutes ago, B55, who's next, has not yet returned, but B65 is.
Okay, we'll go ahead and take up B65.
B55 just returned.
Okay, we'll take up B55 then.
We'll bring in B55. B55, Your Honor.
Please be seated. Good afternoon. We're going to refer to you as juror number B55, and the attorneys are going to have an opportunity to ask you questions about the questionnaire you filled out yesterday. Mr. De La Rianda is going to go first.
Please support. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
My name is Bernie De La Rianda, and I'm going to be asking a series of questions regarding the questionnaire, publicity specifically. You filled it out, obviously, and you made reference that, if I read this correctly, the only thing you can recall is just that the case is big and someone was a cop. Did I get that
Yeah,
right?
someone was caught.
And the kid was African American. Is that all you can recall?
Yeah, I don't really know much about the case.
Okay. I want to explore that a little bit by asking you some questions about that. Your reference points or your means of getting this information, is that from the local media or national news or internet or newspaper or?
Social media.
Okay. What social media specifically do you recall that you would have obtained this information from?
Facebook.
And do you recall that, was that at the beginning when this happened back in February of last year, or was it recently or in between somewhere?
It wasn't recently. It's been a couple months.
Okay. And specifically Facebook, my kids do Facebook, my wife, I don't, but how do you just go on terms Facebook like news aspect of it?
Yeah, like the news feed.
Okay, and so you would have just gotten some kind of information about the case at that time?
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
I know you're shaking your head, or I'm sorry,
Yeah.
nodding your head, I know that's a yes, but for the record, we didn't answer.
Oh yeah.
And was that a one-time thing, or was it more than once?
More than once.
Okay. I guess when you get on Facebook, do you just kind of check the news that they're feeding in?
Yes.
Okay. And so as a result of that, whenever you would have gotten on, if they had something regarding this case, you would have looked at it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you looked at it, is this the best you can recall at this time what you remember about the case, or do you remember anything else?
I don't really follow, so I didn't really pay attention too much.
Okay. When you pulled up your Facebook account and your, whatever you're doing on Facebook, do you just looked at it as just a little blurb? Is it a paragraph, or do you read the whole story?
Basically, people post statuses on Facebook.
Okay.
So most of them were the same, so I used to just read the first line and I'm like, oh, this is about that. So then I used to just move on.
Okay. So am I gathering by your answer that there was commentary about the case on Facebook too, or was it just a story?
Commentary too.
Okay. And when you saw that there was commentary, you really would not look at it in great detail, or would you look at it?
Not really.
Okay. And you think it was several months ago that you started looking at this, or?
It's been more than just a couple of months, maybe like 6.
Well, let's start at the very beginning, back in February of last year. When it happened, at that time, did you see it on the news at all?
On the news, like,
TV. Okay, you don't watch TV news?
No.
Okay. Either national or local, you did not look at it at all?
No.
Okay. How about the newspaper?
No.
Okay. So, other than the Facebook, did you look at any other internet source or website at all regarding the
No.
case? Okay. So your first actual, whenever it happened, was
Yeah.
at Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And at that time, there would have been a blurb just about the case?
Yeah.
Is that correct? Do you recall at this time, other than what you've written here, anything specific about the case? You know, any more facts or individuals involved or anything like that?
That the African American was wearing a hoodie or something like that.
Okay. Anything else you can remember?
It wasn't in, I think it was like in a low-income neighborhood or something like that.
Okay. Anything else?
Nothing else.
Now, the law says, and I think you've already noted that you did not form an opinion as a result of that, I guess.
Yeah.
You did not, right? Is that
No.
correct?
That's correct.
All right, okay. Now, assume you're picked as a juror. You're sitting in one of the chairs back there, in that little box there,
Yeah.
and you're listening to the evidence.
Okay.
And you hear, you know, witnesses say whatever they say. And then you're thinking, okay, well, hold on. Wasn't there something in Facebook about that? And it contradicts what the witness says. You understand in the law, you've got to rely on what the witness says and not what they put out on Facebook. Do you understand that?
Yes.
My question is, can you set aside whatever was in Facebook and rely on what actually happens in this courtroom in terms of the evidence you hear in this courtroom?
That's why I never said an opinion, yes.
Okay, so you have not formed an opinion, and you understand that in the law you've got to keep an open mind and keep an open mind as to both sides.
Yes.
Okay. When you first heard about it on Facebook, and when you looked at it, you mentioned what you said. Subsequent to that, have you anything else you read in Facebook that you can now remember? Like, okay, there was something in Facebook about
No.
the case. Nothing, no more facts at all.
I don't follow it.
Okay, and that's fine. I'm not trying to be critical of it for following it or not following, just asking what you know. And I gather you understand that that's the news, and that always is not accurate. It may not be accurate.
Yes, that's why I never formed an opinion on it.
Okay. Other than Facebook, do you do any Twitter or any other of that stuff,
No.
or MySpace or any of that stuff? Okay. After you read about it on Facebook, did you discuss it with any relatives or friends? Did you have any discussions about the case involving Mr. Zimmerman or Mr. Martin?
No.
You all never discussed it in the family or anything like that?
No.
Okay. Did anybody come up to you and start talking to you about the case?
No.
Okay. And my understanding is you're a student, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussions at school about the case?
No, not like so in depth or anything like that. Just the general, like what's going on. But
Okay. Do you recall anything at this time about any discussions at school about the case?
no.
And finally, the stuff you read in Facebook, was that just news, or was there, you mentioned there was like comments, I guess, section, right? That people are making comments?
Yeah, there is a comment section on Facebook.
And if I understand you correctly, when you would pull it up, there would be commentary, but you would not look at the commentary, or you would?
No, I would not.
Okay. I guess in pulling it up, you would have seen that there was some commentary, but you just didn't read it in great detail.
Yeah, I didn't really. Yeah, I didn't read it.
And in the parts you did see about the news or all that, in that part, was it just straight like facts, you know, ABC, or was it people saying something about it? Forget about the commentary. I'm talking about just the news blurb that you saw.
I told you, I just used to look at the first line. I was like, okay, this is about that. I am moving on. Like, that's how it was.
Okay, so you just kind of
Yeah.
said, I'm not concerned about this, it just,
Yes.
right, okay. Now, about maybe a month ago or 3 weeks ago or something, you got the summons for jury, right?
Yes.
Okay. At that time, did you start paying more attention to the cases that were going on in the community? Not just Mr. Zimmerman's case, but other cases?
No.
Okay. And obviously, you followed the judge's admonitions about not discussing it or anything from yesterday morning, correct? Since yesterday morning, since you filled this out, have you thought about that? Not that you've discussed it with anybody, but have you thought about, oh, here are some additional facts, and you want to let us know anything you can think of?
No.
Okay. So the bottom line is you come into this courtroom with a blank slate, and you're not in favor of one side or the other. You're just going to keep an open mind and rely on the evidence that comes out?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there any doubt in your mind about being fair to both sides? And not letting whatever you saw on Facebook, I know you haven't seen much, impact you one way or the other?
No.
So you can be fair to both sides?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry. I have one moment, Judge. And I'm sorry, in part of your Facebook, I gather Facebook is part where you're like, I know for my kids, you interact with other people, right?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have any discussions with any of your friends on Facebook about the case?
No.
Did any of them express to you an opinion about like the case, like he's guilty or he's innocent or anything like that?
There were statuses on that,
Okay.
based on people's opinions, but I
Right.
never physically had
You did
any
not?
conversations about
Okay.
it.
You never had a conversation with other people on Facebook about, you know, he's guilty or he's innocent or he did
No.
this? Okay. And whatever you saw or didn't, whatever you saw in Facebook about people's opinions, you just disregarded it automatically or?
Yeah, I didn't pay attention to it.
Okay. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Leon.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As you can tell from this part of the questioning, we're really just trying to find out what, if anything, you know about the case that you brought to courtroom here with you today. So if anything that I say, or if during the time we're talking, you remember something that you would like to have answered to Mr. Del Rionda, let me know. Of course, what we're really trying to do is, not that it's improper for you to know about the case, just what we want to talk about so that we know what you know, okay? You're a student presently?
Yes.
Is that in the social sciences or some other
Business.
studies? Okay, so in those classes or in college, have you spoken to any of the professors about it, or have they evidenced any suggestions or ideas about it?
No.
Ever been a topic of conversation for one of your
No.
classes? You mentioned that you sort of talked to students about it, fellow students. Can you give me a little more insight on that?
I talked to fellow students about it.
I thought that you had said that you talked at school, though not in very much depth, I thought you had said.
In my psychology class, I think it was about a year ago, they had a small discussion about it, but I didn't pay attention because I didn't really care about about it.
Can you tell me what you do remember about that discussion?
The same thing that I told him.
Nothing else?
No.
Okay. It sounds like you get all of your sort of current events information from your activities on Facebook?
Yes, but I don't believe them because most of the time they are opinions.
Okay. If you were to look for hard news, something that you wanted to find out about, some current event, where would you look?
Maybe CNN,
Okay.
but I haven't really visited CNN in a long time.
Is that then CNN.com, the online version?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall having seen or heard anything about this one, on this case, on CNN?
No.
And other places for news then from you is basically the Facebook news feed?
Just people's status updates, that's it.
Okay. You mentioned that there were some statuses on this very issue.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
I can't really tell you much because I used to just look at the first line and I was like, okay, this is about that case, just move on.
Tell me why you had no interest in it.
Because it doesn't concern me.
Okay. And these statuses that people would place on Facebook that you would then be able to view and drill into if you wanted to. Tell me, were there any particular statuses that were notable to you?
No.
Anything that gave you sort of cause or pause to consider other things about this case? Anything where somebody said, I believe this, or I think this happened? Anything like that?
No, because they were based on opinions, so I didn't really feel that that was the best way to understand the whole situation.
Will you be taking class this summer?
Yes.
Full load, part-time? How are you doing that over the summer?
I finished last week. Last Friday was my final exam.
Oh, congratulations on that.
Thanks.
Are you going to be going over the summer though?
No.
All right. This case may last several weeks. I think the questionnaire said 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
If you were called as a juror, you would have to stay with us for the next several weeks. Would that cause any type of a hardship for you? And by hardship, we mean travel plans already in place or problems that you have caring for others, and just true hardships as opposed to just the idea of doing your civic duty and sitting with us as a juror.
I may be expected to go to Dubai and India in the last week of June, but other than that, nothing else.
Okay, tell me a bit more about that.
What do you want to know?
It sounds tentative, so is it a vacation? Is it a family occurrence?
Yes, it's a family vacation.
Okay. Do you know that's, I guess, 2 weeks away?
Yes.
And are those plans set presently?
Right now, they're not set.
Do you anticipate going to Dubai in a couple of weeks if you're not otherwise with us?
Can you repeat your
Sure.
question?
If I'm just, when we look for jurors, we have to understand that people have things going on in their lives, and any 4 or 6 week trial is going to affect general living of your life. But if you have set plans, if you have paid for vacation, if you have other what we call hardships, that you're the primary caregiver for children at home, for example, which doesn't sound to be your case at your age. But so I'm wondering if this vacation would fit into that category where it's something that you have to do, or would it really be a problem for you if you didn't?
This vacation will be something that I have to do if I go. Yeah.
Okay. Is that something that your family would be expecting you to be there?
Yes.
And would it cause a problem for you then if the family was going on vacation and you couldn't go with them?
Yes.
Okay. Does some of your family live here with you?
Well, we actually only take one vacation throughout the whole year with about 15, 20 people in my family.
Okay.
So we all look forward to spending time with each other.
And right now that is at least tentatively planned for the end of June.
Yes.
And it's the type of vacation, the way you just explained it, that if it happens and you go, you're expected to be there.
Yes.
You had mentioned that since yesterday, since you started this process, you haven't done any type of research or looked at anything online about this case, have you?
I have not.
Okay. I'm curious whether or not the jurors that you've been sitting with, the other people on the panel, have you had any discussions with them about the fact that this is the Zimmerman case?
No.
Has anyone talked to you about length of stay or the notoriety of the case or the publicity or anything like that?
No.
Is there anything that you believe would be of import to talk to us about what you know about this case? Anything that we haven't talked to you about here today?
No.
If in fact, and Mr. Del Riondo may have mentioned this, if something does come to mind and your memory of that conflicts with what you hear in the witness stand, if you hear it in trial, which would you defer to?
What I hear in trial, because that's the true thing.
So the judge will instruct you that you just have to listen to the evidence and witnesses and leave whatever you bring, whatever knowledge of the case you bring, leave that outside. Would you be able to do that?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Just wait one moment, and when the attorneys are ready, please approach. It would be
B 65 is present, Your Honor.
Please be seated. Good afternoon, ma'am. You are now going to be referred to by just your juror number as B65, okay? And the attorneys are going to ask you questions about the jury questionnaire that you filled out yesterday. All right, and we're going to start with Mr. De La Ronda. Yes.
Good afternoon, ma'am. As Judge Nelson indicated, I'm going to refer to you as B65. I'm Bernie De La Ronda, and I'm going to be asking you a series of questions based on the questionnaire you filled out. Remember you did that yesterday morning? Yeah. Okay. The question is I'm going to be asking you about is just the publicity, what you heard about the case, or what that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's start at number one is, in terms of your knowledge of the case, what you heard about it, was any of that from local news?
No, sir.
Nothing on TV or newspaper or anything like that?
No.
Okay. How about national news? You know, like Fox or CNN or anything like that?
No.
How about the internet? Facebook or just your own research, Google or whatever?
No, sir.
Okay. And so you indicated in your questionnaire that you would have heard about it from church.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And is that from a fellow parishioner or from somebody else there at church?
Both, like someone else and my pastor.
Okay, the pastor too? Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
And at this time, do you recall what specifically you heard about the case?
Not much. He was praying for both parties.
Okay. And that would be at the church you attend here locally in Seminole County?
That's correct.
Okay. And so the prayers were for both families, that is the victims, I'm sorry, Mr. Trayvon Martin's family or George Zimmerman's family too, both sides?
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else other than prayers to the Lord in terms of for both sides?
No.
Okay. Have you done any research on your own in terms of the case? Since you live in the community, have you done any research, trying to find out on the internet, like what the case is about or facts or that kind of stuff?
Have not.
Okay, at all?
At all.
Have you talked to any family members about the case?
No, I don't know much about this case.
Okay. And have you talked to any friends about the case other than at church?
No, sir.
Okay. At this time, do you recall any facts about the case in terms of involving, do you know the names of the individuals? In other words, have you heard the name George Zimmerman before?
Yesterday.
Okay, I'm sorry, yesterday? Oh, okay. Now, you've lived here for how long in the community? Don't tell me where you live, your address, but how long have you lived here in the community?
16 years.
Okay. So you're not one of those people that keeps up with what's in the news?
I don't.
Is that on purpose or?
Just try not to. I don't have cable, I don't have internet. I live my life simple.
Okay. And the only thing that you've notated here is that someone was shot and a lot of people from all over came to Sanford. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. And I know you're saying yes because I can see you're nodding your head, but for the record,
yes.
You just say yes. I apologize.
Okay.
And in terms of when you put on here, a lot of people came to Sanford, is that just based on what people told you, or did you observe them somewhere, or?
No, it's what someone told me in church.
Okay. Did you come to any impressions as a result of that, other than people having the right to First Amendment to come to and speak their mind?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you form any opinions as a result of that, one way or the other?
No, I didn't.
Okay. And as you notated in your questionnaire, you don't have cable, so you don't really know much about the case.
Correct.
Is that correct? Now, you filled this out on Monday. Today is Tuesday. It's Tuesday afternoon. Have you thought about it some more to say, well, maybe I do remember something else about the case, and, I need to let everybody know? In other words, did you go, and I know you followed the judge's admonitions about not talking to anybody, but I'm saying just internally yourself, did you think about it and go, let me make sure I'm not forgetting something? Did you do any of that thought process?
Tried to remember some stuff, I just couldn't remember.
Okay.
Don't remember much.
Right. As best you can, now, if you can, that thought process that you used to try to remember stuff, what did you come up with? What facts, or if anything, do you remember about the case?
Not much other than what I said already.
Okay, and just that someone was shot,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people came from all over?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you watch any or hear about what was going on in court in terms of the proceedings? Because this happened back in February of last year. Have you paid attention to any of that stuff?
I have not.
Okay. Are you involved in going on the internet at all, like on Facebook and other kind of stuff like that?
No.
Okay, I guess my question is, have you come across, even without focusing or reading, anything regarding commentary on Twitter, or Facebook, or all these other sites?
About this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-mm.
Okay. And I know sometimes you don't intentionally do it, but just in going on the internet, you may have come across it, is my question. Did you do any of that stuff?
No.
And you understand under the law, you have to make your decision not on what the limited knowledge you have, but what actually happens in the courtroom. Can you do that?
Yes.
Follow the judge's instructions on the law and then rely on the facts that actually come out of this courtroom?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you're sitting as a juror, you listen to the evidence, and the witness says, ABC. And you go, oh, when I spoke earlier to the attorneys in the court, meaning today, I said I didn't really remember, but now that I think about it, I do remember something different. Just glancing at the news or something. Do you understand that if you do remember something different, what's important is what happens in this courtroom as opposed to what happens outside the courtroom?
Mm-hmm.
Can you agree with that?
Yes.
Do you think the media always gets things right in terms of the facts of what happens?
Not always.
So, as you sit here today, is there any doubt in your mind as to being fair to both sides and making your decision not on what the news covered or didn't cover, but what actually happens in this courtroom? Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. West.
If you care for water, we have some available for you. Thank you. My name is Don West. I am one of the attorneys for Mr. Zimmerman, who is seated over here to my left. Have you ever seen him or his picture before yesterday?
No, someone had to show him to me yesterday as well.
So until yesterday in the jury assembly room, you had never seen his picture anywhere?
Mm-mm.
I'm sorry, you have to speak out.
No.
Okay. How about Trayvon Martin? Do you know who I'm speaking of?
Yes, I've seen him on T-shirts at church. Somebody was wearing it.
And can you describe the picture that you saw on the T-shirt?
Someone with maybe a hood on. That's all I can remember. T-shirt with a hood on and the name.
The person at church was wearing a T-shirt, and the T-shirt had a picture of Trayvon Martin wearing a hood?
Well, with the name on it.
And what was it that the T-shirt said?
Not much, just the name. I'm assuming it was the name.
That's what I'm asking. What name was on the T-shirt?
Could have been Trayvon Martin. I barely remember because I remember Martin. That's all I remember.
Uh-huh. Would the shirt that you saw that caught your attention have had anything else on it? Any other writing?
No, sir.
Would it had anything else in the picture that you might remember?
Nothing.
When do you think that was, that you saw Trayvon Martin's picture on a shirt?
Oh gosh. Had to be recently.
Well,
Can't remember what month.
Sure. About, was it this year, in 2013?
Yes.
We're in June, of course. The year's about half over, if you can believe that so quickly. When do you think it may have been that you saw this shirt with Mr. Martin's image?
I could pick a month, May. I'm not certain.
Okay. May would be last month.
Yes.
Even if it wasn't exactly last month in May, was it within the last couple of months for sure?
I would say May. It wasn't long.
Just, you're pretty sure then it was in the last month?
Yeah.
And that was the first time you had ever seen Trayvon Martin's picture?
Yeah. If that was him, I just seen Martin.
As you sit here today, you're not quite sure even if the picture on the shirt was actually of Trayvon Martin?
Right, I didn't see the first name.
Was it anyone that you recognized? Ma'am, I'm sorry to interrupt, but because of the way we keep track on the record, answers need to be
Okay.
out
No,
loud.
sir. Mhm.
I lost track of my own thought. So you're not quite sure that the picture on the T-shirt was actually that of the person known as Trayvon Martin?
Yeah, I don't know him.
Do you know what Trayvon Martin looks like for sure?
I don't. Mhm.
Do you know how old Trayvon Martin is?
I don't.
Do you know what his relationship is to this case?
That he was the only thing I heard in church. He was the one that got shot.
Okay, so that's clear in your mind? That the person that was shot and killed is Trayvon Martin.
That's correct.
Do you know who shot and killed him?
What I heard,
Hmm?
yes.
Who is that?
They said Zimmerman.
And do you believe that's the same person as here?
Well, if that's his name, just going by the name.
Let me back up a little bit to the first time, from the time this happened, and I don't think there's any dispute that the incident occurred on February 26, 2012. From that point, can you tell me when it was that you first learned about this case in church?
I would say, I'm not sure, March. I'm not sure what month.
When you say March, do you mean March of 2012?
This year.
I see. Okay. So it was in March of 2013 that you first learned of the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin shooting?
Yes.
And was this at the church that you regularly attend?
Yes.
And do you know the pastor there? Correct?
Yes.
And you know some or many of the parishioners?
The members?
Yes.
Yes.
How long have you attended this church?
Almost a year.
Can you tell me when you first joined the church?
Last year, maybe around November.
Did I understand you to say that you've lived in the Seminole County area for 15 years?
Mhm.
So have you lived here continuously since then?
Yes.
Did you live in Seminole County on February 26, 2012?
Yes.
What's the name of the church?
The name of my church that I attend now?
The name of the church you attended when you first learned about this?
Greater New Mount Zion. Greater New Mount Zion.
Know anybody that has?
No, I can't say that.
Have you discussed this case with any of your family members?
I have not.
Do you have children?
I do.
What ages?
21, 16, 12.
You have not discussed this case or any circumstance surrounding the case with any of your children?
I have not. The 21 at college and the other ones, I have not, no.
Any particular reason why not?
A reason why not to discuss it?
Sure.
The other two is, to me, in my opinion, is a little too young.
The 12-year-old?
Yes.
How about the older child?
He's away in college.
I'm sorry, I missed the age. I thought it was 21.
21, 16, 12.
How about the 16?
I have not.
Do you know if anyone else has?
Not sure.
Does your 16-year-old son or your 12-year-old child go to church with you?
They do.
Have you attended any? Have you attended any church that the Martin family may have spoken about the case?
No, listen.
Or how about lawyers for the family?
Don't know any. Don't know any.
When you watch TV, what stations do you watch?
You mean in the past? So right now, I don't watch TV. I don't have cable. I don't have internet. So you're referring to years back?
Well, no, I'm sorry. That's unfair. I agree with you. That's not a fair question. When's the last time you had television available to you at home?
2011, 2012.
When in 2012, do you think?
Maybe. Oh, I'm not sure. I want to say 2011 at the end of the year.
Do you think by February of 2012, you didn't have access to TV?
I didn't.
Did you have any access to television or the internet at work?
I have internet at work.
Do you ever go online to see what's in the headlines?
No, I do my work online.
You've never seen any headlines about this case or any discussion about the case?
I can't recall that I did.
How about when you got your jury summons to come here for this process?
I had no idea what it was about.
Did you happen to mention that you had a summons at church?
No, I didn't mention it. I had to tell my job, though, my boss.
A conversation. And did your boss make any comment about, hey, you had heard that people came from all over to Sanford? When did you hear that?
I was on vacation when it happened, but I heard that also in church the same time, doing the prayer and everything that the pastor were doing. So I took a vacation around in the end of March.
Of 2013?
Yes.
So prior to March of 2013, you were unaware that people
What had happened. Mm-hmm.
that people had traveled to Sanford for a
That's
rally?
correct.
And then once you learned that that had happened, what were you told about that?
Other than what I just said, I don't know too much about this case. So other than a prayer and the little statement that I did make, that's all I know.
Well, what I'm asking more specifically is when you were told in the conversation with Reverend Blue about this case or this event, what was told to you about why people came to Florida?
Well, people came from all over to support or for a rally or something like that.
And what was the purpose of the rally?
For, I guess, this case, for the rally of the Martin family, everybody came from all over, is what I understood it to be.
But you were completely unaware of that at the time that it actually happened?
Oh, yeah, I wasn't here.
Well, but you were still living here?
Yes.
You just were on vacation?
Correct.
Okay. When you drive to work, do you listen to the radio?
I drive to work, I listen to my CDs. Yeah, I listen to music.
Do you ever listen to the radio?
Yeah, every now and then.
What stations?
94.5.
And do you listen both ways on your commute?
I mostly listen to music, my CDs.
Right, but when you listen to the radio, you listen to 94.5?
Yes.
And have you ever heard anything about this case on that station?
94.5? Not yet. I don't listen to it enough. When I listen to it, it's music. Or it's gospel music.
Do you listen to it on the way into work?
Sometimes, most of the time, I listen to my CDs.
Right. What time do you drive into work?
Different times. Sometimes I do 6. Sometimes 5 a.m. Sometimes 7. So it depends on my schedule.
And then sometimes you listen to the radio, and sometimes you just listen to...
Yeah, most of the times I listen to my gospel CDs.
Are you saying, though, that until March of this year, from February of 2012 until March of this year, 2013, that no time on the radio was the death of Trayvon Martin or the arrest of George Zimmerman mentioned?
I'm sure they talked about it, but probably not the times I was listening.
Okay. Would it be fair to say, I guess from what you said, that you don't know any of the actual facts?
I don't.
Do you have any idea
Sorry.
what's supposed to have happened?
Don't know anything.
Do you know anything about, so you don't know anything, any facts of the case or how this thing unfolded or what's been talked about in the news?
That's correct, sir.
Have you ever heard any of the recordings that were made in the case?
What recordings? I have no idea.
Oh, okay. That's an unfair question too, isn't it? Assumes that. Okay, so you haven't heard any recordings that might be considered as evidence in the case?
No, sir.
All right, ma'am. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Please remain seated, and counsel, when you're ready, please approach the bench. Very much. We'll be with you again. Okay, and if we'll bring in our next witness. I'm sorry. You had said witness. I said witness. Next potential juror. Were you looking at your watch because you wanted a recess, or you were just looking at your watch?
Looking at my watch and realizing it's probably not time for a recess yet, is it?
Do you want to wait till after this potential juror? Okay.
B86, Your Honor.
Please be seated. Good afternoon. You're going to be referred to as B86 instead of your name, and at this time we're having the attorneys ask questions about the questionnaire that you had filled out yesterday. With that, Mr. De La Ronda, you may proceed.
Please, the court. Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Bernie De La Ronda. I'm going to be asking you a series of questions just limited to the publicity aspect of it that you mentioned. You mentioned that you obtained some information, as you noted in your questionnaire here that you wrote, and you said from TV, newspaper, and conversations at work.
Yes, sir.
Is that the gist of where you got your information?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's talk first about that first part. TV, was it local and national, or local or national? Or
Channel 13.
I'm sorry.
Channel 13.
Channel 13, local channel. Okay. And do you recall when you gathered that information, was that at the early stages, meaning back when it happened back in February of last year? Was it recently, or did you kind of follow along as every time it appeared?
It's kind of hard not to follow. It's everywhere. I didn't focus on it, but it's hard not to hear about it.
Right, so you would have heard about it at the beginning?
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And then any time it appeared on TV, you would have, just by routine,
Yes.
watching the news, you would have heard it?
Yes, and my children talked about it since they're about
Okay.
this age.
All right. And then you mentioned the newspaper, would that be the local paper?
Yes.
And that would be the Orlando Sentinel, or
Yes,
the,
sir.
okay. And was that the actual hard copy of the newspaper or the online edition?
The delivery.
Okay, comes to your, okay. And then any national news at all, like Fox or CNN, none of that stuff?
Nothing.
Okay. Then you mentioned conversations at work, and we obviously, you put where you work, and that's a school here, and not specifically about maybe the school,
Right.
but just a school here. And was that with fellow teachers there at school, or?
Well, I'm in the front office, I'm not a teacher.
Okay, but I'm saying, did you interact with the principal or the teachers, or how, what conversations? Or other people that are employed there at the front office?
Both.
Okay. Let's talk then about the latter first. In terms of at work, what, if any, comments did you hear at work about the case in terms of facts or opinions, that kind of stuff?
Okay, let me focus a second.
Whatever you remember. We don't expect you to walk in here and
Most
have
of it's just
everything-
been recently talking about how the media blows things out of proportion.
I'm sorry.
Most of it was recently talking about how the media blows things out of proportion.
Okay. And were there different people stating that the media blows things out of proportion?
Yes,
Okay. Did you agree with those comments?
yes.
Okay. And aside from hearing it there at work where the fellow employees talked about the media blowing it, did you come to that conclusion before you heard that?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about that. I gather from watching it on TV and what you've read in the paper, you felt the media has blown things out of proportion?
They always do.
I'm sorry, what?
They always do.
They always do. Okay.
They sensationalize a lot of stuff. I
Okay.
don't pay attention to a lot of it.
So I gather, are you of the opinion or the mindset that what is necessarily reported in the news is not accurate?
Oh, yes.
I mean, is there any dispute in your mind about that? Okay, you're shaking your head like there's no dispute, correct?
None.
Did you have that opinion about the media prior to this case?
Oh, yes. Many years.
Any news?
Many years, yes.
I'm sorry, for many years?
For many years, yes.
Now, you mentioned, and I don't know if you did, I apologize, I know you don't have it in your notated here in your questionnaire, but did you have discussions with your family members about the case?
Just my sons.
Okay. And you have, I'm assuming, at least two sons, right?
I have two sons, 20 and
Okay.
21.
How old are they?
My youngest is 20, and I have a 21-year-old.
And you don't have to name it, just, okay. You have a son that's how old?
20,
And then your other one is?
21.
Okay. And do they live here in Zimmerman County too?
One still lives with me. One is just home for the summer from college.
Okay. And did you have discussions with both of them?
The older one mostly. The younger one's
Okay.
pretty quiet.
The one that was in college, you had
Yes.
discussions with? And if best you can recall, what did you all talk about in terms of the facts of the case?
They made fun of the fact of the Skittles.
They made fun of the Skittles, or your sons did?
Yes.
And did you agree with them, or you just kind of took
I
it all in?
just for them.
Okay. And when you say they made fun, and I apologize for putting you on the spot, but when you say they made fun, like it was Skittles, or the young man was shot because of Skittles, or
He
just it
got
was candy?
Skittles.
Was it just kind of,
It was just
you can't believe it's candy, that kind of stuff?
Something like that. I don't really
Okay.
remember.
Anything else you can remember about the Skittles or your discussions with your son or sons about
Not
it?
really.
Okay. Now, I've got here on your notated in terms of facts that you've got here, George Zimmerman followed Trayvon Martin in his neighborhood, was told by police not to do that, phone went dead, and also Trayvon Martin was shot in a struggle. And that you've seen photos of George Zimmerman after the fight. Is that what best you can recall? And I know Monday morning when you wrote this, as best you can recall what the facts were?
That's pretty much what's been in the paper lately.
What's been in the paper lately?
Yes. And
Okay, all right. Let me, if I could, as best you can, try to remember, if you can, when you first heard about it. What did you first hear about it, if you can remember at this time when you first heard about the case?
when I first heard about it?
Yeah, not when, and I'm assuming it's close in time to February of last year.
Yes.
What you first recall hearing about the case. And if you can't remember, that's perfectly all right. I'm not trying to get you to think of something that, I don't want you to speculate.
I just remember them talking about as somebody that had gone to the store. I don't really remember much, no.
Okay. And since February of last year till now, recently, have you kept up with, I know you watch the news, Channel 13, but have you kept up with the proceedings that have occurred in court in terms of rulings from the court or stuff going on?
Yeah.
Is that a no?
No, not actually until I
Okay.
got the summons.
And so you got summons, okay. Now, when you got summons, did you do some research?
Not research, but I paid more attention
Okay.
to the news or the
So-
paper.
And I believe the summons would have gone out like 3 or 4 weeks ago, or was it more recent?
Approximately.
Okay. Did you then start paying attention to what was going on in court?
I didn't just what was on Channel 13 or in the paper. I
Okay.
didn't sit and watch
Sure.
the TV.
I gather when you got that summons, you didn't know it was going to be for this particular
Not
case?
till I heard it on the news.
Okay,
And I was
so
like,
you
"Oh."
were one of potential, however many there were, right?
Right.
Okay. And you started paying attention. Now, what do you recall after you got the summons occurring in court? If you can, remember what you heard.
In court, I didn't pay attention to that.
At all?
Only what was on Channel 13 that they, just the highlights.
Okay. At this time, do you remember any of those highlights at all?
I just remember them showing the pictures of George Zimmerman, what he looked like, that they didn't show for months later.
Okay. And what did that picture look like, as best you can recall?
It looked like he had a broken nose and
Okay.
swollen, and they showed the back of his head bleeding. And
Okay. And what was did you have impressions when you saw that?
impressions.
Yeah, did you have an opinion as a result of seeing that?
I'm sure something severe happened.
Okay. And did you come to any conclusions as a result of that? And the reason I ask is you stated in terms of you have not formed an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of this defendant. Is that
Right.
correct? Did that watching or seeing that photograph sway you one way or the other regarding that?
I work in a middle school. I understand.
And please don't tell us the school it is unless you want to.
Discipline. Part of my job is making sure all the information in a computer is accurate. So obviously it takes two to get to where that situation was. For me to figure out, I had no opinion either way, but obviously something traumatic happened on both sides.
Okay. So you keep an open mind as to what actually happened. Is that correct? And so is it your belief now that you can keep an open mind in terms of relying on the evidence that actually comes out of this courtroom and making your decision?
I would think so.
Okay. Are you leaning one way or the other this time, or you have not formed an opinion at all?
Lots of opinions, but not one way or the other.
I'm sorry.
Lots of opinions, but not one way or the other.
Well, tell me a little bit about those opinions that you had when you said you have lots of opinions. Everybody has opinions, obviously. And the question is, can you set this aside? And you said you have, but I'm curious right now as to what opinions you have formed as a result of what you saw on TV. And let me prod you back to just to get to the point, because you stated that you saw the picture of Mr. Zimmerman, correct? Did you ever see any pictures of Trayvon Martin?
From that time or just recently?
Recently.
Just recently, yes.
You did, okay. And you also, did you see any other pictures about the case at all, other than that?
Nothing I can think of right now.
Okay. Did you, I apologize if I asked this already, you did not do your own research on the case, correct? You didn't go on the internet and try to get more information or just, Google whatever about the case. Did you listen to any of the commentary, even if it was local, Channel 13, where attorneys may have spoken about the case and made commentaries about the case?
The only thing recently was when you were talking about, it kept coming on and on, about the 911 call, the screaming in the background.
Okay. Tell me, if you can, what you recall hearing about that or seeing on TV about that.
Just that they were trying to decide if it was Trayvon Martin or not, and if they could distinguish who it was.
Okay. And I gather that that's as far as you got on that topic. Is that correct?
I just thought because they did play it, and I just thought you couldn't tell.
Your opinion based on what you heard? Okay. Is that correct? Now, assuming you would hear evidence about that or not hear evidence, I guess my question is, can you agree to rely on the evidence you actually hear in the courtroom if there is evidence about that? In other words, have you prejudged whether you can hear that or not, or whether that's relevant or not in terms of the recording as to who uttered something? Have you prejudged that, or can you keep an open mind as to what actually evidence is presented in the courtroom about that?
I could probably keep an open mind.
So calling the police, is that what you're basing that on?
Well, I think I heard that one, but that was the one that the woman had.
Okay.
She was calling, or she called 911.
I got you. So you heard both of them. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any doubt in your mind, as you sit here today, about whether your perceptions or consideration of, in terms of being fair, in terms of relying on what actually happens in this court versus the media aspect of it? Let me rephrase that and make it
Thank
simple.
you.
In other words, you've heard about the media,
Yes.
you've heard publicity about this case, and I gather you're of the opinion that the media does not always get it right?
Correct.
Is that correct, or am I putting words
Oh,
in
no,
your
no,
mouth?
no, you're correct.
Okay, so I gather you're gonna set that aside, or can you set that aside? Whatever you've seen on TV,
Yes, that was it.
you can. Is there any doubt about that? Do you have any dispute about that? Is that correct?
No,
Okay.
okay.
May I have a moment? And I apologize, I may have cut you off when you were talking about the opinions that you may have had some. Did I understand that correctly?
I was hoping you'd forget that. but you
I'm
didn't.
sorry, what?
I was hoping you'd forget that.
Okay, well, I've got a good man over here that reminded me, Mr. Guy. What do you recall in terms of your opinions? I guess, let's make sure we understand where you're coming from there. Is that based on what you heard on the news, right, or?
The opinion was basically regarding what I heard about Trayvon being up here because he was expelled from school.
Okay, all right. And did that make a bigger impression on you because you're also in school?
Probably.
Okay. Now, did you take that, what you saw on the news, did you take that as hardcore evidence? Oh, that is evidence and it's really true?
No, I took that as to be from a parent point of view.
Okay. So tell me what opinions you formulated as a result of hearing that.
That being a single parent with two boys of my own, I'm very strict with them. I don't want to judge, but I just want to say that this could have been prevented had he not been up here. That's all.
So your opinion was that perhaps if, assuming that's true that he got suspended, that this would have been prevented if he had not been here?
Right.
And not that you're passing judgment, but then did you feel, as you mentioned, you're a single parent, that if the parent had done something more as a result of that?
From what I
That
see in
young man would still
school,
be
kids
alive?
and parents and
Okay. And is that based on just being a parent yourself and then also being
in the
involved in
situation
school?
I'm in, both.
Okay. Any other opinions that you formulated as a result of that, or any other topics? Now, that opinion you came to, which is, we all live in this great country, we're able to formulate the opinions. Did you have any further discussions about that with your sons?
Actually, no.
You did not. In other words, you didn't tell your kids about, listen, this is what happens if you...
No, I've done that years ago. I don't do
Okay,
that much anymore.
all right.
That.
Do you think, since you formed that opinion, if you were to hear, assuming if she testified, Mr. Martin's mother, do you think that would sway you one way or the other? Would you automatically, when you heard her testimony, would you automatically in the back of your mind, would that opinion pop into your mind and go, hold on, and would that impact you being able to be objective in evaluating whatever testimony, if she did testify, if she presented?
I would think so.
You think you could? Your first impression wouldn't automatically kick in and say, hold on,
I wouldn't say it wouldn't pop in my head, but
do you think you can set that aside? And you know, only you would know. And what we're trying to do here is be fair to both sides. And what we're asking, I guess, what I'm asking you specifically is if you were to hear from Trayvon Martin's mother, would you automatically, first said your impression when you first heard about it, would that pop in?
I would think it would pop in, but I don't.
Okay. And so let's assume it would pop into your mind. Do you think you can listen to what this lady would say? Well, what I'm trying to figure out is whether that would in any way interfere, first of all, being able to hear, because sometimes people for opinion, they just tune the person out. They just kind of look the other way and just completely disregard what the witness says. That's number one. And number two is, even if you heard the person, you would still be thinking about your first impressions about that. Do you understand my question?
I'd like to think I could separate it.
You think you could? So the first thing is you think you could keep an open mind and listen to what that witness said? In other words, Trayvon Martin's mother said? Is that correct?
Yes.
And the second thing is, obviously, it pops in your mind, do you think you could automatically throw that out and base your decision only in evaluating her testimony on what she actually said on the witness stand, as opposed to those first impressions you got, that first opinion you came to? And only you know.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. And so the question is, in being fair to both sides, that is the defendant and the state, you think you can do that? And this is the time to tell us. That's why we're asking you this.
I'm thinking I could.
Okay. So there's no dispute in your mind that you could just completely disregard your first impression. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And if you heard no evidence about, assuming there's a suspension, you can completely disregard that, like you had never heard about it. Or would that be harder for you to do? I gather by the way you're looking at me, that might be harder for you to get out of your mind.
That might be harder to get out of my mind.
Okay. And would it be fair to say that in some way you're not going to be able to get that out of your mind in terms of the case?
If it was to be presented as to...
Right. In other words, let's assume you sat there as a juror, you're picked, and you're juror number 28 or whatever, juror number 2, and you heard the evidence, and there wasn't a single piece of evidence about Trayvon Martin being suspended. But in the back of your mind, it's there, you've heard it, you came to an opinion as a result of that. You think you could take that out?
I think so.
Okay. You hesitated a little bit earlier, and I'm not trying to pick on you, but am I correct in saying that you hesitated earlier? Now, and obviously you got a minute to think about it while I was formulating my next question. Why did you hesitate at first, and why are you positive now, or are you sure that you can set it aside?
I'm thinking
And I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm sorry. That's why we get to ask you questions, and Mr. O'Mara or Mr. West, on behalf of the defense, will be able to ask you questions.
I'm just trying to do the best I can as far as...
We know you are.
And just try and go by whatever is said.
Right. So you believe at this time that you could just completely disregard that? What you had heard about the suspension, if that never came in, you could just completely disregard that. When you went back into the jury room to deliberate, you think you could form your opinion on actually the evidence you heard, as opposed to something you may have heard earlier that in no way, assuming it's true first, even comes into evidence.
I can try.
And that's all we can do. As you sit here today, you think you could?
Probably.
Okay, now probably is like you're not sure. Right? Wouldn't you agree that probably means maybe?
I'm just thinking I'm human. I'm going to do the best I
Oh,
can.
we know you are, ma'am.
I can't guarantee anything.
So you really can't guarantee as you sit here today that you could?
I can try.
Is that fair?
Say. Yes.
Is that fair to say that at this time you really, there's things that we can say certainly in life, and then we sort of think, I'll try to do my best, but I can't guarantee it. Would you be the latter?
Probably.
Okay, I appreciate you being so honest with us. All we're trying to do is really ask you these questions, and you're kind of putting on the spot. But we're both sides are trying to get a fair trial for each of our respective clients. We represent the people of the state of Florida. Trayvon Martin is the person that was shot in this case, and the defense represents George Zimmerman. But thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you. Imagine what it's like to be a witness or even a defendant. Why don't you take a deep breath for a second, because unfortunately I'm going to spend a minute or two on what you just went through. Okay? Judge Nelson is going to read you some instructions. And I'm not supposed to really paraphrase it for you. I'm not going to try to. I'm going to give you some general principles. And those are this: that we expect you to bring your common sense as a citizen who's called to be a juror, and to use that common sense in applying the law to the facts of the case. She tells you to do that. Can you do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Another very important part that we are to focus on here today, and this is just part of voir dire, what we call a jury examination. There will be more. This particular part is just talking about what you knew about the case before you got here. And you've talked about a couple of things. As a premise, the judge is going to instruct you that the only way you can come back with a lawful verdict, one that can be trusted by all those who will hear it, is if you listen to her instructions and follow the law. And I think you said you can do that, right?
Yes, sir.
Part of those instructions are this. Though we're going to spend some time finding out what you know about the case, you have to agree that you will only base your verdict on what you hear here in the courtroom. Will you do that?
Yes, sir.
The example that Mr. Del Rionda used was this question about, you had heard something about that Trayvon Martin might have been expelled. Do you understand that that may not even, that's the word she used. Could you?
Sorry, what's the objection?
Objection, I don't know that she used the word expelled, but.
Okay, she did.
Oh, I
You
think.
can continue on.
Sorry.
It's okay. You know, as you sit here today, that might not even be true, right? You just heard it on the radio from the very same people who you said you don't know that if you really should believe them,
True.
right?
True.
That the media, I think your words were hype things up or something in that vein, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, would you agree that anything you may have heard, whether it is about Trayvon Martin or George Zimmerman, may not be true?
That's true.
And if you were to rely on that memory to the exclusion of the evidence that you hear in the courtroom, that would be improper for you to rely on that memory?
You're correct. I should.
And that though you may have heard a bunch of things about the case, if it came down to what you hear in the courtroom versus what you think you heard or might remember from outside the courtroom, which are you going to rely on in deciding your verdict?
What I hear in here.
I'm sorry?
What I hear in here.
Any question about that?
No.
Is that something that you'll just try to do, or is that something that you can, in fact, commit to do?
I can commit to that.
Right? I mean, if the judge is going to tell you to do it, will you listen to her instructions?
Yes, sir.
And if there's a conflict in that evidence, you remember what we just talked about. And let's just say you don't hear any evidence at all about Trayvon Martin's past. All you know from the evidence is he was here in Seminole County. And you have to ignore anything else you may have heard about that, because it doesn't come from that witness stand that you haven't heard in this courtroom. Can you do that?
Yes, sir.
Other things where you've mentioned the 911 call, you've mentioned the non-emergency call. We'll call them those two different things so we know what we're talking about here, okay? You may not hear those at all in the courtroom. You might, but you might not. Any concern leaving that outside the courtroom and determining what you need to decide this case upon only on what's in the courtroom?
No, sir.
You think that would be unfair of us to ask you to do that? To only ask and decide upon the case with what we tell you here in the courtroom? Yes? You okay with being a juror who can do that? Yes? Now that we both questioned you like a witness about it, do you have any question of us? Do you have any concern about being able to do just that? Act as a juror who will listen to the court's instructions, apply the law to the facts of the case, and then come up with a verdict? Will you carry, you have some, what we call it, skepticism with the media? Is that a nice, accurate term? Okay. Are you sort of skeptical by nature?
Probably lately.
I'm sorry?
Probably lately.
Okay. Well, you've made it through the teenage years of a couple of sons, so
I No, they weren't the problem.
That's not the problem?
No, the ex-husband was.
Nicely said. And we may even talk about that, but that probably doesn't have too much to do with pretrial publicity, does it? Okay. I'm going to talk a bit more. Any other concerns about the issue that Mr. Delaronda ended with and I started with about making sure that you don't infect what you hear in the trial with what you thought you heard outside? Right?
You straightened it out.
Did I?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Anything else that needs to be cleared up on that issue? You okay with it? If you're a juror, you're going to leave all that stuff outside, just listen here today or during the trial? Okay, great. And let's just talk about some of those other influences that you may have had from the media with whom you're quite skeptical. You defaulted, your TV is to channel 13, right?
Pretty much, yes.
I know that they've covered some of the hearings live, where we actually could sit here and watch us talk and the judge rule. Did you do any of that? Did you listen to any of the hearings? No? And I'm going to ask you, as Mr. Delaronda did, sometimes you shake your head and I know what you're saying, but Corey Porter is not allowed to interpret. She can only, that's okay. So you didn't watch any of that on TV?
No.
And you get some of your news from the Orlando Sentinel?
Yes.
And you said you get it delivered. Do you read it every day?
Scan.
Okay. I know, because I also read it, that they have had ongoing coverage of this case, actually for the past 16 months. Is there anything from your reading the Orlando Sentinel that if I asked you, tell me one thing you remember reading about, what would it be about this case?
Being sequestered.
Okay. So some self-interest shows up, huh? That's okay. Let's talk about that for a minute. You've read on the questionnaire that this trial could last 4 to 6 weeks, correct? Could be less, could be more, but that's our estimate as best we can tell. And there's also a possibility that you would be here not only for that period of time, but also that you could be sequestered. Decision we haven't made yet, but it could happen. Would that fact of having to do that in order to serve us as a juror, would that create such a hardship that you wouldn't be able to serve?
Not so much a hardship as that I only have my son for a couple of months, and he goes back to New York in August.
Any chance he's in the jury pool?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right, so that's certainly a concern, right? Do you think that that is something that you will just, if we were to say, we understand your son's in town from college, but we really need you on the jury, and we pick you. Let's just say we do it anyway. Are you going to be so distracted because your son's at home and you're not spending time with him, such that you would not be a competent juror for us? Or would you be able to put that aside and still pay attention, focus, and be a good juror?
I think I can.
Okay. You know what happens when you say think I can instead of yes or no. So let's spend a couple minutes, because if you can't, that's okay too. You know, your son's in town and he's
But
not
that's one of
here.
those questions that's hard to answer until you've been in it.
Sure. Okay. If you were sitting though as a juror, would you be able to pay full attention? So let's just say we start right now, and your son just came home yesterday. Are you going to be so distracted so that it shouldn't serve? Or can you pay attention and give us that attention for the duration of the trial?
If it was sequestered, I would think I could have. But
Could
if
not?
it's not, if I think I could.
Okay.
ready.
Great, thank you very much. I almost feel like I should have a few more questions to make the tape change worthwhile, but I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'll remain seated for just one moment, counsel, when you're ready, please come up, approach the bench. We'll talk with you again soon, and if you'll please follow Corporal Debs outside the courtroom, and if you could bring in our next, oh, you wanted to take a recess? Okay, let's take a 10-minute recess. It's, okay, good time for the recess. Court will be in recess for 10 minutes. Be seated. We're back on the record. Let's bring in our next potential juror.
E6 is present, Your Honor.
Thank you. Please be seated. You're going to be referred to, as you just have been, as juror E6. And the purpose of this questioning is for the attorneys to have an opportunity to talk to you about the questionnaire that you filled out yesterday morning. Okay? Mr. De La Ronda, you may begin.
Please, the court. Good afternoon, ma'am. As Judge Nelson indicated, we're going to be limited to certain questions regarding the questionnaire in terms of publicity. Okay. Let me just start at, you've indicated in your questionnaire that you gathered some information from TV and also the internet. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about the TV aspect of it first. Was it local or national news? Or both?
Local. It was probably local, and I don't watch on a regular basis, just here and there. But
And when you say local, was it about the time that this happened back in February of 2012, or was it recently?
mostly around when it happened.
Okay, right around the time that it happened last year?
Right, yes.
Okay. And then, did you do any follow-up in terms of following the case after that?
No, I mean, I would just, sometimes I'd see a headline here and there, but I haven't followed the case.
In terms of the proceedings that have occurred in court, did you make a point to follow it and try to, keep attention, keep focused on what was happening at all?
No.
Okay. And then you mentioned you did online news articles. Is that just by virtue of just do the Orlando Sentinel or other stuff? Or?
I have Orlando Sentinel web at or news app, and then
Sure.
Eyewitness 9, I think it is. So whenever I just see headlines, and that's about it.
Would that just be as you're going through the internet doing other stuff, you would just kind of glance at it, or would you
Right.
actually read it in depth of all the stories?
No, I would just see headlines. I mean, it seemed like there'd be a little headline almost every day. So yeah, usually I would just pass it by.
As best you can recall, is what you've got here in terms of the facts that you can recall, based on the case, what you've written down? When you remember on TV or on the internet, what you recall reading or seeing on TV, have you noted everything you can remember at this time about the...
No, I just kind of
Summarized it?
But
Okay.
yeah, I remember more details than I put on there.
And I gather you realize that the media, or I view the opinion that the media always gets everything right, or they're not sure, or what?
Oh, no, they're not.
Okay, so you agree that what's important is the evidence that actually comes out in the courtroom?
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in other words, whatever facts you obtain from the media, either from TV or online, you would agree that you have to leave that outside the courtroom?
Yes.
Can you agree? Is there any doubt in your mind that you could put that outside?
Well, no, I mean, any news I read, there's always a chance it's not right. You always read it with a grain of salt, I guess.
Okay. You also, I'm assuming, did you have any conversations with anybody after you read it online or you saw it on TV? Did you have conversations with any people about the case?
Not that I remember, no.
Okay. You didn't talk to anybody and get their opinions or that kind of stuff? There was no
No.
like... Okay. And so you summarize it in terms of you knew the details of the case as you mentioned Trayvon, a teen, and you mentioned about approximately his age, was killed by George Zimmerman, right? And you remember reading about that or watching that on TV, is that correct?
Right.
Okay. And George Zimmerman was in a neighborhood watch of some aspect of it?
Right.
Okay. And that George Zimmerman claimed at some point killed him in self-defense?
Yes.
Okay. And is that kind of the summary of what conclusions you came to as a result of reading and watching it on TV? Now that you've made your mind in terms of an opinion, what I'm saying is that what you recall in terms of summarizing what the facts were that you got?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I know there's more details, but yeah, those
Sure.
seem like pretty solid
Okay.
facts.
Do you recall whether you would have heard any kind of, let me restate the question. Do you recall seeing any pictures at all about the case, any aspect of the case?
No, I've seen Mr. Zimmerman's picture, photo, just his face. I don't recall seeing any other.
Did you form any impressions as a result of seeing his face at all?
No.
Okay. And did you see any pictures of Trayvon Martin at all that you could recall?
I can't recall. I mean, I remember reading that he wore a hoodie, but I can't remember if I ever saw a picture of that or not. So I don't know if that's what I read or something I saw.
Sure. And I gather as you're absorbing all this stuff, you're not coming to conclusions one way or the other about the case? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. In other words, at some point you also realize that you got a summons, you may be a potential juror at some point, right? 3 weeks ago or a month ago?
Yes.
Is that correct? Did it come to mind that you possibly could be a juror in this case?
Well, this past weekend it occurred to me.
Okay, all right. Did you do any research as a result of that? Let me get caught up on the facts at all, or?
No.
Okay. Did you come to any conclusions as a result of that? Oh, let me solidify my opinion one way or the other. You did not?
No.
Okay. And you understand that under the law, as you noted here by your answers, that the law really requires a person to keep an open mind and disregard really anything that they've seen on TV or read in the newspaper. Is there any doubt in your mind that you can do that?
No, there's no doubt in my mind.
And you did not do your own research on the case at all, is that correct, at any time?
At any time, no.
Okay.
I mean, I've read it in an article.
Sure,
or two.
sure. I'm saying, other than reading it, did you go to any particular, or did you go to any websites about the case at all?
No,
Either,
just.
pro George Zimmerman or pro Trayvon
no,
Martin
no,
case?
no.
Okay. In the news that you watched on TV or the articles that you may have read online, you understand that sometimes the news, when they put the news, there's also commentary, by lawyers or other people. Do you recall any aspect of that at all?
Commentary. No, not. I mean, vaguely, maybe. I can't remember anything in particular.
Sure. Do you remember whether the commentary was made by lawyers or other legal experts, or was it anybody involved in the case? Meaning lawyers involved in the case?
No.
Okay. Let's assume you're picked as a juror. You're sitting there. You listen to the evidence. You start hearing the evidence and you go, oh, God, I remember something different on TV. Or I remember one of the lawyers either involved in the case or just a lawyer commenting from, somewhere up in Atlanta or something about the case. And that person said this and this. But it's different than what you hear from the witness stand. Can you take that out of your mind when you remember watching on TV or seeing it in the newspaper?
Oh, yeah.
In other words, you realize the law requires you to set that aside.
Yes.
Can you do that? Okay. And I gather everything else, in terms of you have no concerns about the conflicts or anything like that, is that correct? I think you've noted here there's no issue about being able to sit as a juror, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. If I may have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
I may have asked you this already, but in case I didn't. Did I ask you whether your friends had expressed any opinions about the case at all?
No, I haven't really discussed it with anyone.
You haven't discussed it with any friends or anything, or
No.
relatives?
I mean, maybe at one point I might have said something to my kids about it, but no, I've not discussed.
Sure. How old are your kids?
11 and 13.
Okay. And when you talked about it, just saying like there's something in the news, or do you recall what you would have told your kids?
Just behavior that is safe, and that not that you're doing anything wrong, but just to be proactive and to stay safe. It's just generally better to, if you don't have to, don't walk around at night. I mean, they're young for that,
Sure.
But just kind of. Just, I guess, making it a teaching moment.
Okay. But there was no aspect other than this was recently in the news, and just make sure that you're careful out there.
Yeah, and I don't even think I talked about it in specifics. Just, this kind of thing can happen, and there was recently this happened, and
Oh, okay.
you don't want to be mistaken for, because. What am I trying to say? Just not to have the appearance of that would invite trouble.
All right, okay. So it wasn't you giving your opinion about the case, it was more like a teaching moment to your kids, like
Right.
when you're out there, something can happen.
Right.
Like you would any case, like, something happens in Arizona or anywhere, is that correct?
Right. Yes.
Okay. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. West.
Yes, ma'am. Afternoon. My name is Don West. I'm one of the attorneys on behalf of George Zimmerman, who is seated here, and Mark O'Mara. Because we introduced ourselves yesterday morning. That was the group that you're in. Thank you. Just summarizing what I think I heard you say a few minutes ago and what's on the questionnaire is that you knew about this case shortly after it happened and it started to get media attention.
Correct.
Is that when you knew who the people involved were?
Right, when they started reporting it, after it happened.
Right, so that's when you knew the name Trayvon Martin?
Yes.
And you knew the name George Zimmerman?
Yes.
And did you see the pictures that the media released or that were released into the media back in, say, March or April of 2012?
I can't recall them. I don't recall what they were, but I saw them.
Okay, no, I'm not asking if you can actually remember them as much as did you follow the news then, and that would have included pictures that had been made available?
I was working full-time last year at that time, and I mean, I don't think, I don't remember any pictures. I think I just heard the news as it was coming out, but I didn't spend a lot of time watching TV or looking.
Oh, sure,
into the...
sure. And we're not in any way suggesting that there's a right or a wrong answer to these questions. The purpose today is just to get a sense of what the prospective jurors have come in contact with through the media before the case started.
Okay,
So you may have clear memories of some things, you may have very vague memories of others, and maybe none whatsoever of others.
It's pretty vague. I mean, I know when it first happened, there was a lot of news about it, and so it just, you know, on the radio, you would hear things. On the news, if I happened to catch it, I saw it, but it's pretty vague. I was working full-time, and I was busy at that time. But now I'm not working, and so I kind of scroll through the headlines and stuff a lot more than I did a year ago.
Okay. When about in time did you leave your job or quit working?
It was around the middle to the end of September of last year.
Last fall.
Mm-hmm.
So up until that point, your exposure to the news was less just by virtue of working all day.
Right.
Is that fair to say?
Right. And then coming home and kids and very busy.
Sure. And you might, grab a headline or two, but you weren't paying particular attention?
Right.
Did that change in the fall where you began to follow news in general more carefully and this case as well?
No, I think maybe the beginning of this year I've probably had more time to follow news, but still I'm not one to just sit in front of the TV. So. But yeah, I do have more time, free time, at the beginning of this year.
At any point in time, was this case in particular something that you purposefully followed?
No.
Did you get the news about this case about the same way you would get the news about any other case or news story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let me just kind of run through a few things here. Did you attend any events that may have been connected with this case, any public events, demonstrations, or protests?
No.
Ever sign a petition or make your support of one party or the other known?
No.
I take it you've never seen any of the actual hearings that have been held in this case that may have been broadcast?
No.
Your local news outlet, the one you watch the most, is that a cable station or a local channel?
We have satellite TV, and I'm pretty sure we only get local channels.
If you care for some water, we have some of that available.
Okay.
Would you?
Sure.
Mayor Cruz.
Thank you. Vending machine is out.
Sure. That would be very nerve-wracking. Okay, we're talking about the news outlet satellite. Does that include the local cable station 13? That
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
was that the primary source of your local news through channel 13?
No, I don't have a particular channel. It's kind of whatever is on.
Have you been aware of any of the decisions that have been made in the case? And by decisions, I mean things that the judge has decided as to how the case may go forward, or something relating to any of the evidence.
I'm sure I've read or heard some of the decisions. I don't know. I know, I just remember there's headlines saying something, a motion was filed and the judge denied something. I don't recall specific.
Is there anything about the decisions, or in fact, if you were going to pick something about the case itself, just the kind of exposure that you've had, the impressions that you've formed over the last year or so, is there anything in particular that stands out?
No, it just, what most stands out in my mind is that it was just very unfortunate. A very unfortunate incident.
In your in the questionnaire, where you mentioned just an overview of the basic facts of the case that you do understand, you mentioned that you know that Mr. Zimmerman was a neighborhood watch person.
Of some sort, yes.
Do you have any more information about that? Did it impress you one way or another that he may have had that position?
No, I've never known a neighborhood watch person, so I didn't really form an opinion. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, I've never really experienced that.
Is that in and of itself something that you believe is a good thing or a bad thing, or have any opinion?
I thought about it. I guess it could be a good thing or a bad thing.
In this case, have you formed an opinion whether
No.
or not that's important in the case?
No, I mean, I really don't even have, I don't know enough of the facts to form an opinion.
You indicate that Mr. Zimmerman has said the shooting was in self-defense.
Right.
Is there any information that you have from the newspaper or television that makes you think it wasn't?
No. I guess that's kind of why I really haven't paid much attention to the case, because I don't believe there was an eyewitness, so it's kind of, there were just two people that night, and I really can't make a guess without knowing facts.
Well, of course, and any decision by the jury would be after all of the evidence is taken, and you've been
Right.
instructed on the law, you've heard arguments of counsel and such.
Right.
But what we're trying to do here today, and perhaps for several more days to come, is to get an idea what the prospective jurors bring in the courtroom with them because of the publicity of the case. So that's really the focus of my question, not how you might decide later, but whether or not at this point the information that you have makes you think in any way that, hey, he may be saying it's self-defense, but I heard this, or I think this, and maybe that's not really true.
Well, no, that's what I mean is I never spent the energy to even try to come up with an opinion because I don't know the facts. So I just never really felt like investing the energy to even form an opinion. I in no way ever foresaw that I would be sitting here, so
Sure.
there was just no need for me to, I had stuff going on in my life. So I haven't thought much about it one way or the other.
Has the case ever been a subject of conversation with you and your social friends or relatives where you might have said, for example, hey, did you see this in the paper today? It's about the Zimmerman case.
No.
Anybody ever mentioned to you that they'd noticed something about this case and asked what you thought?
No.
I know from what you said you have regular, the newspaper is available to you regularly, and of course the news as well. Could you estimate how many times you may have read, if we're going to just add it all up, how many different exposures perhaps to the case from either the media or conversations, maybe at work when this first happened, or any way to estimate how many times this has sort of come across your mind?
Okay. So counting like if I saw a headline and didn't read the article?
Just something that made you think about it, yes.
Oh. 200, I guess. I mean, it's kind of anytime the news is on, they'll say one little bit, not without making a big story out of it, but just having it brought into my mind, yeah, at least once every few days.
Have you heard any of the attorneys connected with the case speaking in the media or interviewed?
No, I don't believe so. Possibly, maybe making one statement, but it's vague and I can't remember if it happened or not.
Anything that an attorney on behalf of Mr. Zimmerman, or perhaps on behalf of the state, or perhaps on behalf of the Martin family that sticks out in your mind?
No.
You had mentioned, please, you had mentioned that you did see a picture of George Zimmerman's face. Have you seen any pictures of his face following the event with injuries?
Oh, no.
Never seen any of the pictures that may show any injuries?
No, it's always just the one basic, just his chest up, and it's kind of just with, it's the same picture I think they always flash.
The one that just kind of shows up next to the news article?
That's the only one I've ever seen.
Have you heard any of the recordings in the case?
Yes.
There are two main recordings I'm referring to. One is a 911 call, and the other is a call Mr. Zimmerman made to the police. Do you know if you've heard either or both of those?
I think I heard both of them.
The 911 call, do you remember anything about that call in particular, or why it was in the news?
Well, I think I don't remember when that came out, but I just remember thinking it was really difficult for me to hear anything or know who was talking.
Have you heard any of the calls that may contain a yell or a scream of some sort?
I think that was the...
Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes, I think.
And the other call I'm talking about is the one that Mr. Zimmerman made that was recorded at sort of the beginning of this case.
Okay. I believe I have heard it.
Have either of those calls caused you to form an opinion about Mr. Zimmerman's responsibility, guilt, or made you in any way think that you have an opinion about whether he's guilty or innocent?
No. I guess that particular call was a little more thought-provoking, but it didn't cause me to form a hard opinion about it.
The call with to the 911 operator with the screams?
Mm-hmm.
Have you formed any opinion based upon listening to it, other information in the media about it perhaps, as to whose voice it is screaming?
No, I don't know.
Are you aware of any court proceedings ongoing in connection with that?
Yeah, I do recall reading that there were some audio experts in court.
What's your sense of that then? And what I mean is, what do you know about that, and what do you...
That's all I know. That was kind of maybe a headline, so I don't know anything more than that.
Have you followed that aspect of the case closely enough to have your own opinion about those experts?
No.
Are you generally aware of who the experts are or what their positions on that issue might be?
No. I think there was maybe a headline just saying that there were audio experts in court, but no, beyond that.
Do you know what the experts were being asked to testify about?
No, I mean, I can imagine that they were giving their opinions on the calls and the recordings, but that's just what I would guess. I don't know.
Do you know what aspect of the recording they were asked to give their opinion regarding? I may not have said that very well, but do you know what I'm getting at, do you think?
I didn't read anything, but I can guess what they were maybe trying to testify about, but no, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Do you know the status of that issue, meaning where that issue stands in the case overall?
No, I mean, the last thing that I read, and I don't even think I read the article, but I think it said there was no conclusion. There was no, there was no determination made, or something to that effect.
Okay. Is that basically a summary of what you know about that particular aspect of the case?
Yeah, I think I just saw a headline last week or something, and that was it. I mean, I really just kind of skimmed through. And
do you know, as a result of that, what the judge is being asked to do in connection with that evidence?
No.
Do you know whether or not the jury will actually hear that evidence?
I don't.
So let's look at it this way. If the jury were presented with evidence that was different or otherwise different than what you thought the evidence might be in the case overall, would you be able to limit your consideration of the case to just the evidence that was presented basically within these four walls?
Yes.
The question would be like this, you know, here's the evidence, you're on the jury, here's the evidence, that you don't go back and you say, you know what, I know that, but I remember an article, I remember a newscast, or I remember something that was different or more or less. And I'd like to tell everybody about it. Do you understand that wouldn't be appropriate? Okay, so for you though, would you be able to limit for your consideration the evidence that's presented here if you were on the jury?
Yes, I really don't put much stock into what comes across in the news because it's so speculative and so no, I mean I really haven't paid attention and yes, I would separate that.
I don't know what kind of work that you did before while you were employed. What did you do?
I worked in financial services.
Did you supervise people?
No.
Were you asked to resolve disputes?
No.
And what I'm getting at is whether in your professional life, if you've ever had to deal with issues limited to the facts at hand and disregard other information that either wasn't relevant or that you weren't allowed to consider.
I mean, I guess at some point in life I've made a decision with the facts I had at hand, not knowing future details or unknown details, but no, not professionally.
That's fine. Just like I said, I'm just trying to understand what your life experience has been that could possibly come into play. As to the lesson, the learning lesson, I think you said with your children, do I understand that you never talked with your children about the specifics of the case? Or did you talk with them about the scenario overall?
It was kind of like, yeah, it was a scenario, and I don't remember how specific, because I generally try to, when I talk with them, to talk in generalities. Mm-hmm. But it was just, the gist of it was, you know, to just make sure that, you know, you're not doing anything wrong, but just make sure you don't have the appearance where someone else might just get a false impression, and don't put yourself in harm's way. And then I think I told them that there was a teenager and he was killed, and just, you know, trying to get them to think about what they do or what appearance they might be giving by their actions.
To draw some lesson out of what you knew of the case.
Right.
Did they happen to know about the case from school or anything?
No.
I know your contact with family or friends and discussions about the case has been very limited, but have in any of those conversations anyone expressed their opinion to you, whether George Zimmerman is guilty or not?
No.
Friends, neighbors,
Not
former
that I
coworkers?
can recall, no.
May I have just a moment? Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you'll please remain seated for just a moment. When council's ready, please approach the bench. Please be seated. Good afternoon, and from here on out, you're going to be referred to as Juror E40. And the purpose of the questioning today is to go over the juror questionnaire that you filled out Monday. Okay, Mr. De La Ronda is going to start. You may proceed.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hello.
From reading your questionnaire here, you basically were living in Iowa at the time that this happened back in February of last year. Did I have that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how long have you been living here in Seminole County? How long after? When did you move to Seminole County is what I'm trying to ask you.
I moved to Seminole County in November of last year.
And you mentioned in your questionnaire that you have heard about the case and based on national news.
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall, was it like NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox News, CNN, or?
Probably NBC.
Okay. And would it have been a very just basic, something happened in Sanford, or what do you recall at the time you first heard it, what you heard about the case?
I don't recall. I just recall that we were told that, that an incident was reported in Florida. That's what I remember. It was not
No specific
major,
about facts or anything
no,
like that?
no.
And since you were living in Iowa at the time,
Yeah.
did you pay attention to the case at all after that?
No.
Okay. So you moved down here, you said, I think in November?
Yes.
Okay. Once you moved here in November, did you start paying attention to the case at all?
There have been reports on TV, but I didn't go out of my way to seek additional information.
Okay. And when you say reports on TV, would that have been on local TV or would that still have been national news?
Local.
Okay, all right. Do you recall local TV, what particular channel you watched?
2, I believe.
Okay. I think we've covered the aspect of the TV aspect of it. Did you do any media search, or let me rephrase the question. Do you on a regular basis get on the internet, on Facebook or other aspects of our social media that we have?
I don't have a Facebook account,
Okay.
no.
Do you do any research on Google, or just you get your news by the internet is what I'm trying to ask either?
Very little.
Okay.
Very little.
Do you recall anything in particular on the internet that you may have stumbled upon regarding this case?
No.
Okay. Do you get the newspaper since you've moved here to Seminole County?
I get the Sunday newspaper.
Okay, and that would be the Orlando Sentinel?
In there, yes.
Okay. Do you recall reading about this case in any Sunday newspaper?
I believe there was some articles in the last 2 or last Sunday.
Last Sunday specifically?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And what, if anything, do you recall reading about the case last Sunday?
I remember there was a lot of information about logistics.
Okay.
How many tickets would be released and where people should park and
That-
media information.
Anything about the facts of the case?
No.
Okay. All right, at some point, you got the jury summons to come here,
Yes.
correct? After receiving that, did you pay more attention to the news? Because I believe you got that about 3 or 4 weeks ago, the summons, or?
At least 3 or 4
Okay,
weeks ago,
all right.
yes.
Did you start paying closer attention, knowing that you potentially could be a juror in at least one case here in Seminole County?
I believe it was on the news. There was a reporter that said if your summons said June 10th, it's likely.
Okay.
And that was really the only connection I made.
As a result of that, did you then do any research about the case itself?
No.
Okay. And was that on purpose, or you just weren't interested in it?
I'm just too busy at work. I just
Okay.
didn't have time.
Okay. And so all you really remember is it was an incident involving the persons mentioned, Mr. Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin, and one of the individuals is deceased. I think is what you wrote. That's,
Right.
Is that all you really remember about the case?
I remember something about in Florida, remember a gated community stated, and I knew somebody was a teenager.
Okay. Anything else?
That's about it.
You know, as we go through life, sometimes we remember things later that we didn't remember at the time, as of yesterday or today, and you know, they pop in our minds. And so
Sure.
the question is, you're a juror, you're listening to the evidence, you're hearing certain evidence, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, well, hold on, I do remember watching the news or reading something in the paper, and it may have been a little bit different the way the media reported it. The question is, if that were to occur, Do you think you can set that aside? Do you understand the law requires you to set aside and only rely in making your decision on your, obviously, your God-given common sense, but also the facts that come out in the courtroom? Do you
Yes.
think you can do that?
Yes.
Okay. So you don't have any question about if something popped in your mind about the case just from the media?
No.
Okay. Do you always believe what's in the media in
No.
terms of what they tell?
No, I do not.
Okay. And you're not the first person to say that, so don't feel bad. And what, you just have you understand that they have, do you feel they have opinions when they write the articles, or just you don't think they get everything, or what's your basis for not?
I would say a combination of all of the above, the information they may have at the time, what they place importance on, the way they might report something, or just their take on what the different types of people they may have interviewed as opposed to others.
So you're not getting a complete story, I guess, for lack of a better word. It may not be accurate.
Probably would be accurate, yes.
And I apologize if I already asked you this. Once you found out you were coming down here and you knew it potentially was about this case, did you do any research since last Sunday, I guess?
I did not.
You didn't have much time. But...
I did not.
Okay. Anything else that comes to mind now since you wrote this Monday morning, and you followed the judge's admonitions not to talk to anybody either at home or obviously that you've been waiting here in the courthouse, but I'm talking about maybe you've had a little bit more time to think about it. Was there anything else you can remember that you said, oh, I wish I wouldn't have written down, I do remember this other aspect of it?
No.
Okay. How about with families? Have you had any discussions about the case prior to coming to court when the court, Judge Nelson told you can't talk about the case? What I'm getting at, the time you got the summons, the time you came to court, did you have any discussions with family or friends about, like, oh, I potentially might be a juror, in the Zimmerman case, or anything like that?
Not really. No, I remember saying I'm summoned to jury on June 10th. There are maybe several cases going on in Florida. I don't know. I've never been summoned here before. I don't know the protocol or procedures, so I didn't really draw conclusions.
As far as you can remember, nobody gave you their opinions about the case at family or friends, or did they?
They did not.
No. How about back in Iowa when you first heard about it? I'm going back now. Back in 2012, February 2012, when you first heard about the case, did anybody there, family or friends, give you, or co-workers, et cetera, give you their opinions about the case?
No.
So I gather you had no first impressions and you have no lasting impressions about the case, and that's why you were able to put that you have no opinion and you can keep an open mind. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. May I have a moment, Ron?
Yes, it is.
I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Meara, sorry.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
How are you?
Fine. How are you?
Good. The afternoon wears on. We tend to slow down a little bit, so I'm going to try and talk it up and talk a little bit louder. No, you're fine. You can relax. I'm just trying to keep myself going. The main reason why this part of it happens is to make sure that whatever you heard about the case, you leave outside the doors when you come in. So if you said yes to that question, we can stop right now and answer it. The problem, as Mr. Del Rionda mentioned, is we want to drill in a little bit just to make sure that what you may have heard doesn't show back up later, and then you have to deal with it. And it's easy to deal with it, but I want to talk to you about that.
Sure.
If you do remember something that we haven't talked about here today, the judge is going to tell you, going to instruct you that the way we handle criminal cases, all cases, is that you have to listen to what the witnesses have to say, look at the evidence, and decide only and solely on that evidence. Does that make sense?
Yes.
The judge would tell you to do that. Would you be able to agree and accomplish that?
Yes.
Okay. Corollary to that is, of course, if you hear anything outside, whether you happen to look down and see a newspaper on the floor as a juror and see a headline, you have to convince yourself to ignore that. And if you saw a headline a month ago, you have to make sure that it doesn't creep back into your process. Can you commit to that as well?
I could.
Sometimes other jurors will do the same things that we're worried about, that you get picked, you're on the jury, you're now back deliberating, the case is over. State's put on their case, we've heard jury instructions from the court, and now it's your turn to decide on a verdict. And some other juror says, I never heard about this fact. And I remember reading about it. I remember my aunt told me about it or whatever. how would you handle that juror who tried to bring in something that wasn't talked about from the jury, from the witness box?
I think you need to steer that person to remember that they need to pay attention to the information that was delivered in the setting of the courtroom, and perhaps ask for transcripts if that's a possibility, sort of bring people back to what the information was that was delivered in the setting in which you need to make your decisions based on.
And you can take that on as a juror to make sure that not only yourself, but all the other jurors individually, and the jury as a whole, applies the law as the judge suggests, or the judge orders, instructs you to do.
Sure, absolutely.
You'd mentioned a moment ago as one of the reasons why you didn't run out and look at more information about this case was that you're too busy at work.
Yes.
Was your job that brought you down here from Iowa?
I took a position here, and that's
Okay.
why I moved.
Okay, sounds good. So it's a new position here?
Yes.
6 or 7 months old, I guess?
Yes.
Okay.
6 months.
There is a chance, as you may have read in the jury questionnaire, that this case could last 4 to 6 weeks. That fact alone, would that cause you problems? Obviously, it's problematic to leave a job for 4 or 6 weeks, but would that cause you any specific problems that we would need to discuss amongst us in the court if you were asked to serve as a juror in this case?
I don't believe so.
There's also a chance, though it's not been decided yet, that because of some of exactly what we're talking to you about here, the publicity of the case, that the jury may be sequestered. And what that means is that you don't go home at night to try and save inviolate everything that you hear. Because obviously, if you promise to listen to just what's here in the courtroom, we send you home and you get blared on by the media, that impact could really have a negative impact on the case. So the judge may decide that you'll spend time with us not only during the day but at night. Would that in and of itself then cause a problem that you could not get around?
No.
Okay, so you could serve for 6 weeks if it takes that long, and even if you were sequestered.
Yes.
Have you gotten a feel for the local media here yet in the 7 or 8 months you've been here?
Not really. I don't watch much news.
Okay. And do you have cable?
I do.
What
Dish
is it?
network?
Satellite?
Satellite, yes.
Okay, so you get the national stations if you want,
Yes,
and you also, I think, have access to the locals as well.
yes.
Any particular ones that you do watch? I think you said Channel 2 is
Channel 2,
becoming your default?
yes.
Okay. If I were to throw out some of the names of the major stations like CNN and Fox and ABC, NBC, CBS, out of those 5, which one would you default to?
NBC.
And why is that?
I'm just accustomed to it.
Okay.
I enjoyed watching Peter Jennings. That was his news, so I stayed with that station.
Okay. There are some stations that are known for being of a certain political bent. Do you consider yourself likening one of or any of those stations because of a certain political view or slant on the news?
No.
And if I were to ask you, based upon your limited exposure to the case, the one most significant fact that you remember, is the one thing that sort of distills out your perspective on this case in 1 or 2 or 3 sentences, what would it be?
I recall the phrase gated community. I recall the phrase teenager. And that's about it. And some struggle. That's about what I remember.
Anything else?
No.
And you said, should something else come up, you'll make sure that you don't let it come into your process. Should you be chosen as a juror, and also you would not allow other jurors to do it, correct?
Correct.
Then I have no further questions. Appreciate the time. Thank you.
And if you'll just remain seated for a moment, and counsel, when you're ready, please approach the bench.
E54.
Okay, please be seated. Good afternoon. From here on out, you're going to be referred to as juror E54. And right now, we're going to have the attorneys ask you some questions regarding the juror questionnaire that you filled out Monday morning. Mr. De La Ronda will begin.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon. I'm going to refer to you as E54, sir. We've had an opportunity to look at your questionnaire that you filled out, and so I'm going to be asking you some questions as a result of that in terms of publicity you were exposed to and your opinions about that. I believe you stated that you wrote down maybe 6 or 7 lines about the facts you remember, and you wrote that, I believe, yesterday morning. Is that correct?
Yes.
You've had a little bit more time maybe to think about it. I know you followed the judge's admonitions not to talk to anybody about the case, but what I want to know is there anything else that comes to mind other than what you've written down here now about that you've had some time to think about it?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about what else you remember about the case?
Well, as I was thinking back, I know that there was, I know that there was Mr. Zimmerman made a phone call when he first noticed young Trayvon Martin. To, I believe, I don't know if it was just the police, I think, just a non-emergency police number, I think it was.
Okay.
Was talking to the dispatcher there about a suspicious, what he thought was a suspicious character, suspicious individual. And there was some conversation, I don't remember the whole conversation that took place with that.
Anything else that you can remember?
Well, then I believe that there was also a 911 call that closer near the end of the incident that took place. And again, I don't know all the particulars.
Sure. Anything else you can remember?
That's pretty much all right
now. And so I think about, if I'm reading your writing correctly, I'll take my glasses off to read it. George Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin in Sanford over a year ago. Trayvon Martin died at the scene or at the site. And then you've got here, Mr. Zimmerman originally was not charged for any crime by the Sanford Police Department, but after public protests and an investigation by the state attorney's office was later charged with second-degree murder.
That's right.
Okay, is that accurate? Did I get that right?
Yeah, you read it right, yeah.
Okay, and then you also stated, but the state attorney's office was later charged with second-degree murder. The defendant is pleading self-defense was the reason for shooting Trayvon Martin because he was attacked and beaten at the... Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And other than what you've told us today, is there anything else that comes to mind in terms of what you recall hearing about the case?
Of that, no.
Okay. Let me get first in terms of where your source was for hearing about that. I'm assuming it was in the news, correct? I mean, you didn't come to court and listen to any of this stuff. And in the news, was it a local news TV or was it national news?
No, it was local news.
Okay. Do you remember what channel?
I believe it would have been Channel 13, BH Bright House now.
Gotcha. And do you remember that being the case in terms of when you were first exposed to it back in February of 2012?
Yes.
Right around the time it happened?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And did you keep up with it since that time?
No.
Okay. Was it just whenever it appeared on the news, or did you just, what I'm trying to find out is that you say, oh, that case happened here in Seminole County.
Right.
Let me keep my note of that, or did you just get that first impression at the beginning and then just drop off, or later pick it up later?
No, I think I got the biggest attention was due to the protesting and everything that took place, and then once the charge was made, then I just pretty much just lost interest in it.
Oh, okay. So your first, I guess, focus was you heard about the shooting, right? Mm-hmm. And then you heard that he was not arrested at the time.
Yeah, well, I think that came out as I was watching the news. I think my initial was when the protests started happening. Okay. When I really started being drawn to the
So
news.
that was your focus, and if you could, why was your focus when the initial protest was occurring?
Well, I guess I was surprised. I mean, I don't understand why the Sanford police didn't charge him. I don't know what the criteria is or what happened, what they saw at the site or what they learned there, why they wouldn't. have charged him. So it piqued my interest the same as the protests were protesting about there was no charge done. So it made me curious about that, why there wasn't a charge.
All right. So your first impression was Mr. Zimmerman has shot somebody, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess you're questioning in your mind, why was he not arrested?
Well, I questioned it at the time the protesters started protesting, and I started joining. I started not joining, but started thinking the same thing. Why wasn't there an arrest in that case? And you know, why I was interested in why they were protesting,
Right.
and then that got my attention.
In terms of your first impressions about the protesters, did you come to the conclusion that that was wrong that they were protests, or and you almost, I believe you used the word like join, not like you're physically joining,
Right,
but
right.
in mind were you joining like you couldn't understand?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm trying to find out from you, sir.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, in my mind, I was trying to understand. I mean, you know, when the police did their investigation, I assumed that was it. Okay, and that would have been enough. But when the protesters protested and they got people's attention to look into it and investigate, and I was confused about why that was going on. Why was the state attorneys investigating it? But evidently, whatever they turned up, which I don't know what it was, but whatever they turned up, made them believe that there should have been an arrest, and they made the arrest. So.
Yes, sir. From the aspect of focusing your attention because of the protest, did you come to the conclusion or opinion that that was a bad thing, or that was a good thing, or no opinion whatsoever?
Well, no. So I say that it turned out to be a good thing, I guess, because I mean, we're doing a better, getting deeper involved in what happened and trying to learn the truth. Evidently, there's some discrepancy about what took place.
Okay. So you did not automatically think that that was a bad thing, that there were protesters out there wanting, at least for something to have an investigation, a complete investigation to occur?
No, I don't think it's a bad thing, no.
Okay. What did you understand, what I'm trying to find out, and artfully asking you, what did you understand the protests were about? That they wanted, like, an investigation to be done, or they wanted him arrested, or what did you understand the protests were about, if you can remember?
Well, I think they were questioning why there wasn't an arrest, and I think they wanted to see an arrest made in this case, and at least to get to have an opportunity for justice and
Yes,
further go into play here.
So you started focusing on it when the protests. And in terms of the protests, did you feel the protest based on what you remember? Was it local people, national people, or a combination? Or?
Well, I believe it started off as local people, but then some national people got involved, and some pretty big names got involved.
Yes, sir. And do you recall any of the big names?
Oh, well, Reverend Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, too. Kareem Brown.
What did you think of that in terms of somebody from out of town coming in and being involved in the protest? Did you form an opinion as a result, like they shouldn't have come, or they should, or no opinion whatsoever?
Well, no, I have no opinion. I mean, I feel like that was their choice to do with what they felt they needed to do to help out. And I don't know if they were asked to come. I don't, if they came voluntarily, I don't know.
And as a result of that, did you pay closer attention to the case after that?
No.
Okay. So did you kind of drop off after that, after he was arrested?
Yes.
Okay. Did you pay attention to any national aspects as a result of the case?
No.
Okay. Not at all whatsoever?
No.
Okay. And after he was arrested, were you aware that there were court proceedings in the case?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But I don't remember what all they were.
Sure. Did you pay attention to any of that
No.
at all? Any hearings, what they were about, or who testified and who didn't?
No.
Okay. Do you watch any national news at all?
Yeah, I watch. Yes, I do. Yeah.
What,
ABC usually like.
Okay, and that's what I was going to ask you next. What particular station? Some people favor Fox, CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS. I think I've got everyone covered.
Yeah, ABC.
ABC is more yours?
Yes.
Okay. Not Fox or CNN?
No.
Or, And do you remember any aspect of the case from ABC?
Yeah, there might have been some on. I don't remember any of it, but they may have picked up a couple stories here and there, but
Okay.
I don't remember.
All right. Now, we're coming now, hopefully, closer to the time we're today, specifically when you got the summons, which is about 3, 4, 5 weeks ago.
Yes.
Okay. Did that kind of get you thinking more about this particular case?
Sure.
Okay. Tell me if you could, did you do any research as a result of that in terms of like what's going on in the Zimmerman case now, or did you pay more attention to the court proceedings, or?
No, I tried to think back about what had taken place, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't know I knew that, I think the research I did do was to find out when the trial was starting.
Sure.
It was going to be on the day that I was starting to report.
Okay. So you didn't know for sure whether you were going to be a potential juror in the Zimmerman case, but you knew it was around the time that you got the summons, so you kind of put 2 and 2 together?
Yes.
Okay.
So I looked up to see when it was going to start.
All right. Other than looking up and your research when the trial will start and you came to the conclusion that you potentially were a juror in this particular case, did you do any further research on that?
No.
Okay. And the research you did, was that online, I'm assuming, or did you go back and, I'm assuming you hadn't recorded any?
I think I went online.
Okay.
Yeah, I did a Google search.
Yes, sir. And that was the other aspect. Do you on a routine basis, use Google and like
Yes.
everybody else?
Sure.
Okay. Do you have any like Facebook or other type of social media, Twitter?
Just Facebook.
Okay. In Facebook, did you come across this story at all in terms of what had happened here in Sanford?
On Facebook?
Yes,
No.
sir. Okay. Did you communicate with anybody about the case on Facebook or Twitter
No.
or whatever other things
No,
you use?
no.
Okay. Have you had any discussions at work about the case?
No.
Even back in February when it happened, or even about the protests?
No. I work in another county, and I figured people there wouldn't. I don't talk about my personal life anyway
Okay.
at work. So.
All right. So you didn't talk about this at all
No.
with anybody? How about with family? Did you have any discussions with family about the case?
We might have talked about it back at that time when I was interested.
I apologize for getting personal. You don't have to tell us who, but obviously don't mention any names of,
Sure.
of your children or wife or anything. But did you have a conversation with your spouse or kids or anything about the case?
Yeah, both.
Okay. All right. And let's take the spouse first. What do you recall talking about the case, about any aspect of the case?
I really can't recall. I mean, I would assume that it was the things that I was interested in back at that time.
Okay.
That we were just talking about that. You know, we might have talked about why things were happening the way they were.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my question is, back in February when it happened, you say, how did you refer to what had happened to Trayvon Martin? Did you refer to him as a kid, or do you remember, or did you have any questions with talking with your wife why it happened or didn't happen?
I referred to him as a teenager. I have a teenage stepson. So.
You do?
Yes.
About the same age,
About the same
as far as you can know? So did that kind of, in your mind, kind of focus on that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. How about from the aspect of Mr. Zimmerman? Was there any discussions about Mr. Zimmerman or about the fact that, he shot a teenager? Any aspects about that? And what I'm trying to get is what kind of discussions you have. I have discussions with my wife and kind of talk about the case or about things. Did you talk with your wife about the case?
Again, I just can't remember all, exactly specifically what we talked about. I mean, I can't recall.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about with your kids? And how old are your kids, by the way?
Well, I have a 16-year-old living with us, and we have a 26-year-old, 28-year-old. That's
Okay. Is he out away in college or just living somewhere else?
She's
She
away.
is?
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Did you have discussions with both of them?
No, just the teenager.
And that was because he lives here in town, and when I say in town, in Seminole County. And okay. What discussions do you recall having with him? Was it more of like a lesson type thing, or was it more? Do you remember what aspect of the case you discussed with him?
Well, and I think we talked. It was kind of a lesson thing. We talked about being careful. One of the things that I'll bring up. I realized that the way Trayvon Martin was dressed caused some speculation about him in the situation, and my son dresses the same way.
Meaning he wears what, a hoodie?
He'll wear a sweatshirt with a hood, and
okay.
And so we caution about that.
That he might, to some person, it might be a. Tell me what. I don't want to put words in your mouth. What did you tell your son about the hoodie aspect?
Well, yeah. I mean, that you know, be careful, you know, just cautious. You know, it could be I don't know why, but the people wearing that outfit can be misconstrued, you know, misinterpreted of what they're, you know. This doesn't look to me, and I'm an older person, it's not something we would normally do, and we just
Sure.
want to be cautious, you know,
Okay.
careful not.
And I gather, since your kid's 16 years old, that he say, well, hold on, Dad, you know, it's not against the law to wear a hoodie.
No, he didn't react that way, no. He
Okay, how did he react?
understood that it was, that he had to be careful.
Okay. Did you prevent him from then on wearing a hoodie?
No.
Okay. Has he worn it since then? Okay. You just told him to be mindful that somebody else may think that there's something wrong with it?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you can remember talking to your son about the case itself?
No. I think that was the only thing we really wanted to be concerned, address with him.
Other than that aspect of it, in terms of Trayvon Martin wearing a hoodie, was there anything else about his attire that caused you concern,
No.
based on what you saw on TV?
No.
Anything else about Trayvon Martin that caused you concern that you read or seen on TV about that you can recall?
No.
How about anything regarding George Zimmerman? Anything about that you read or seen on TV about him?
No.
Do you recall seeing any pictures on TV about the case?
Yes.
Okay, what pictures do you recall seeing about the case?
Well, I saw, I did see the pictures of Mr. Zimmerman's injuries that he sustained.
Okay.
I do recall seeing those.
Okay, what pictures do you specifically remember seeing about injuries?
His face and the back of his head.
And what were your impressions when you saw those injuries?
That he sustained those during the attack that he alleged.
Okay, you used two words in terms of, make sure I understood what you're saying, that he was attacked, you're saying?
Right.
And you said alleged?
Yes.
Okay, why did you use alleged and attack?
Well, because up to now, I don't know what really happened.
Okay, so and that's what my question was. Did you formulate an opinion based on observing those injuries that he was, and I'm going back to what you were saying, he was beaten. Did you automatically assume that based on those photographs you saw that he was beaten?
Yes.
Okay. And you used now the word alleged, meaning, can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, I'm just trying to be careful because I don't really know what happened. And until all the evidence is heard in the case and arguments are all made in the case, I don't really know what happened. So I don't really have an opinion on what happened.
So in other words, you don't know what happened other than what you're going to hear in the courtroom. You agree that what's important is what you hear in the courtroom, not what the news is reported?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Did you did you listen to any of the recordings that came out of this case? What I mean by that is the 911 recordings or anything like that?
Like I said, I knew there was recordings, but I don't remember the particulars in the conversations that took place.
Okay. You don't remember any aspect of it, any of the recordings themselves?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And listening to them at the time.
I'm afraid if I tried to say something back to you, it wouldn't be accurate, and that's what we're concerned about.
Yeah. I appreciate that, sir. I'm just trying to find out what you know, and you don't remember something, it's perfectly all right to say you don't remember. My question is, did you, in listening to the recordings, whatever recordings you heard, did you form any impressions as a result of those recordings?
No. I mean, I can't remember what the recordings were, so I can't say I did. So.
How about recently, in terms of any proceedings in court? Did you listen to any of the proceedings in court recently, within the last month or so?
No.
Okay. Any other aspect of the case that you can remember now that you say, well, hold on, I've had some time to think about it. Even now, while I'm asking you questions, anything about that you can recall at this time?
I appreciate the question, but I can't think of anything.
Okay. If you were picked as a juror, you're sitting there as a juror, you're listening to the evidence, and something comes out. And I'm going to make something up. It didn't happen in this case, but let's assume that it was a case involving a car, right?
Okay.
And witnesses said the car was blue. And you said, hold on, there was something in the news, but the car was described as being red. Which would you rely on in arriving at a decision in the case? What you remember in the news of the car being red, or what the witnesses said about the car being blue?
Whatever happens here in court.
Okay. So my question is, when you're sitting as a juror, hopefully we have good memories and we remember things. Can you agree that what came out in the media should in no way whatsoever impact your decision?
That's correct.
Can you agree with that?
I agree with that.
Okay, because we don't ask you as a juror to kind of, we don't have like a magic thing, wand that you put over your head and it erases everything you've heard.
Right.
But do you understand that what's important is?
Yes, I understand.
Okay. Do you always believe that what's on TV is accurate in terms of the news?
Well, not always, no.
Okay. Do you believe most of the time it's accurate?
I believe they try to be accurate most of the time, but.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how about in the newspaper? Do you believe that everything they're reporting is accurate?
Not everything, no.
Okay. In terms of the news on TV and in the newspaper, do you recall, aside from the news, do you recall commentary about it by attorneys or other people commenting about the case?
I can't recollect. I'm sure there was some, but I don't remember.
Do you remember any attorney involved in the case having any kind of news conference or just talking about the case?
Well, I know that there's been news conferences by the attorneys, but I don't remember what they were.
Do you remember which attorneys were involved in that?
Well, I recognize Mr. O'Mara, so
Okay.
I believe it was, he had some conferences.
Yes, sir. So you've heard him on having press conferences, I'm assuming. Now, we on behalf of the state have not had press conferences. We hold that against us because we did have any press conferences.
I don't hold against anybody, no, sir.
Okay. Do you remember any aspects of what Mr. O'Mara talked about?
No, I can't remember that, what they were back then. So.
Okay. Let's assume you're picked as a juror, and you hear some evidence, and then you remember, oh, well, Mr. O'Mara said, ABC, but I haven't heard that. Would you hold it against Mr. O'Mara because he previously said something about commentary and then it didn't come out that way?
No, I'm going to judge, I'm going to make all my decisions based on whatever happens here within the courtroom.
At this time, you believe you've got an open slate. In other words, you haven't formed an opinion whatsoever, even leaning a certain way.
That's correct. I'm not.
We have opinions, but then sometimes we're kind of leaning this way, but we want to keep an open mind. Are you in that way whatsoever?
No.
Okay, so you're not even leaning one way or the other.
That's correct.
Okay. You believe in the concept in terms of presumption of it. In other words, you believe that a fair trial for both sides?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, not just for the defendant, but also for the state?
Absolutely.
Okay. If I may have a moment?
Sure.
Your Honor. What did you think about the fact that Mr. Zimmerman was not charged originally? What impressions did you form once you saw that on TV?
Well, I guess when I first heard it, I felt like, I guess my opinion or my impression was that the police department did a thorough job at the scene, and their discovery was enough to make a decision that there wasn't a charge.
Yes, sir. And later you made a determination, or you wrote, I'm sorry, that you found out that he was charged.
Yes.
Did you start thinking about, well, hold on, earlier the police didn't charge him, now all of a sudden it's charged him. You go, what the heck happened?
Yeah.
Okay, what did you think about that?
Well, again, I think I said earlier, I don't know what took place during the investigation, but the investigation must have uncovered something that made them rethink the circumstances, and then they came up with a charge. So I mean, all I tried to figure out was I don't know the answer, I don't know why. Okay. I was just confused by it, but yes, it happened. It happened. So. Okay.
I may have a moment, Your Honor. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Mr. West?
Thank you. My name is Don West. I'm one of the attorneys for Mr. Zimmerman, and you said you do recognize Mr. O'Mara here, seated to my left, and of course George Zimmerman at the end of the table here. Do you know if you've heard lawyers for the Martin family speak at press conferences?
I don't recall any.
Nothing particular about press conferences in general, regardless of who gave them, stands out in your mind?
That's correct.
Okay. Completely forgettable, I take it.
Sorry.
We get that. All right. So let me just kind of put some parameters around the kind of news that you've gotten and how much of it along the way. What I take from your comments is that you pay particular attention to the case early on, once it really hit the media, and then not so much, at least not in particular, over a fairly extended period, and maybe it's back because of the trial coming up and you being summoned. Is that a fair overview? Okay. Any way to estimate, if you were just trying to pick a number, how many times you may have read a story or seen something online or heard this case talked about in the radio?
No, I couldn't estimate any number.
After the initial sort of media part, you talked about the demonstrations. Did you pay any particular attention when you listened, when you heard the case mentioned or saw a headline in the newspaper?
During that time?
No, after that.
No, after the arrest.
I know, as you've said, you don't yourself hold an opinion, or certainly not a firm opinion, about what happened in the case. Have you expressed a view or a slant in your discussions with people?
No, I usually tell my friends that I can't make a decision or opinion or a judgment until I've heard. So I've heard all everything presented in the case in the court. So.
Well, of course, there's no way to hear everything unless you are actually on the jury.
That's true. I mean, that's true. That's true.
So, have others expressed opinions to you that?
Yeah, others have got opinions, and I just can't give one. So.
Have co-workers or family members expressed an opinion to you about whether they thought George Zimmerman was guilty or not guilty?
I know co-workers haven't because I haven't talked to anyone about it, no, I don't think my wife has given me an opinion one way or the other either.
Does she follow the news more closely than you?
Less than I do.
When you had the conversation with your stepson, was that to talk about guilt or innocence in the case, or this notion of how one needs to be sensitive to how one appears to others?
It was the appearance. Yeah, it was not about the guilt or innocence.
Do you think that the article of clothing, a hoodie, in and of itself is significant in the case?
No, I don't think it should be.
Is that a term that you became familiar with because it was connected with the case? Or somehow that was associated with the case? Or did you always feel
the term
hoodie?
Yeah, I think that's probably first I heard of it was from the case.
Some of the demonstrations were specifically called that.
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
sure. You were aware of that. Sort of became a symbol of some of the public rallies and protests.
Sure.
Do you yourself have any opinion, any reason to think that a hoodie, a hooded sweatshirt itself, is actually a significant part of the case?
No.
Back in February, March of 2012, when this first sort of hit the national press, there were questions raised about why George Zimmerman wasn't arrested, that you've talked about here today.
Mm-hmm.
And then you commented that sometime later, after there was an investigation, that obviously he was arrested, charges were filed.
Right.
Did that make you think that somehow the Sanford Police Department's investigation was shoddy or incomplete or biased in some way?
No, I mean, I don't know why they, what the investigation determined or anything. I don't know why all of a sudden there was an arrest, or it was an arrest to start with, and why there was an arrest after. I don't know all that.
Did you ever try to figure out what, if anything, happened between the Sanford Police Department not making the arrest and then the decision some period of time later? What, if anything, was different?
No, I didn't look into it.
What caught my attention, why I'm asking you, is you made the comment that there must have been, or maybe you think there was something else or something different that resulted in the charges being brought when they hadn't been brought before.
I assume so because there was a change in the outcome. So I assume there was something that caused that.
Looking at the case since then and information that may have been released in the public, have you formed any opinion as to what that evidence might be, or if in fact there is any more evidence that would have formed the basis for the charge?
No, I haven't formed an opinion.
You may have suspected, hey, if he's charged, that must mean there's some more evidence.
Well, I assume there was something else. I don't know what.
Is that something, though, that you can compartmentalize and not carry with you into the jury room when you're considering the evidence brought before you?
I assume that if it's not presented here in the courtroom during the case, then it's not applicable.
Or doesn't exist?
It doesn't exist. Yeah.
Okay. So you won't speculate as to what additional evidence?
It's not relevant. It's not relevant, and the speculation is not relevant.
You feel pretty comfortable that you could make your decision in this case without speculating, without considering information you have, whether true or not, from any other source than what you hear in this courtroom?
That's correct.
Sure. I'm sorry, just give me just a moment, please. Thank you.
I'm not going anywhere.
Did you, let me, just a couple of general things. Did you attend any of the events that you talked about that you knew took place?
No.
Or whether for support or just for curiosity?
No, I've never supported him.
Or sign any petitions or any of that? And you haven't watched television to actually participate in hearings that we've had? You haven't seen actual
Correct.
testimony or such?
Correct.
If I could have just one more. Oh, thank you. That's all.
Thank you. If you'll remain seated for just one moment, and counsel, when you're ready, please approach the bench. At this time, court will be in recess for these proceedings until 9 a.m. And counsel, I'm just going to go downstairs and give the admonition to the jurors that are waiting there, and counsel will also be down there for that purpose. Yes.